Hi, this is Joe Ziemba, the host of When Football Was Football here on the Sports History Network. Aside from my podcasting duties, I'm also a sports collector. And as such, I'm very pleased to share the exciting news that the Sports History Network has partnered with Rochester Sports Autographs, the largest JSA authenticated autograph distributor in the United States, where you can get deals on over 30,000 autograph sports collectibles. So as a collector, I was very pleased when I visited the site of Rochester Sports Autographs. The massive inventory is easy to search, carefully documented, and visually appealing. The options seem limitless, whether you're looking for an autographed baseball, signed football helmets, or basketball jerseys, among thousands of others. I found everything from a Babe Ruth autograph, a signed football by Dick Butkus, and an autographed Larry Bird basketball jersey. And as a collector, you'll be delighted with the very competitive pricing on JSA authenticated products. Made possible since RSA deals directly with athletes, so there's no extra markup, and the savings are passed on directly to the customer. Perhaps you're looking for an early gift for Mother's Day or Father's Day. Heck, who needs a holiday as an excuse to give a piece of sports history to your loved ones? Or how about yourself? Today seems like a great day to add to your own sports collection, right? RSA even has film, music, and other entertainment autographs on the site, so there's something for everyone. All orders from Rochester Sports Autographs are top quality and shipped to your door with top authentication and a money-back guarantee. And to make sure RSA knows that the Sports History Network sent you, we created a special link for you. All you need to do is head to shoprsa.com/SHN. That's shoprsa.com/SHN to get your own piece of sports history today.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. On September 18th, 1895, Daniel David Palmer possibly performed the first chiropractic care over in Davenport, Iowa. The question looms, was this chiropractic's origin story? Or just another myth that would later be found to be inaccurate? This reminds me of an event that occurred 15 days earlier, revolving around a football game, and it involved a 16-year-old quarterback. Welcome to Fantasy Football Origin Stories, where each episode is a journey back in time to explore the unique experiences of some of the coolest and most influential people in the fantasy football industry. I'm your host, Arnie Chapman, also known as the Football History Dude. Now, I love fantasy football, and I want you to come along with me to explore the yesteryear of the armchair gridiron. So hop on board my DeLorean, and let's get this baby up to 88 miles per hour. This time to step off the DeLorean, the date is September 3rd, 1895. We are here to watch what was thought to be the first professional football player, 16-year-old quarterback John Brawlier from Indiana College. He was here to accept $10 and some expenses to play a football game for the hometown team. It was believed that he was the first professional football player for decades. But later on, a ledger was found that is now considered pro football's birth certificate. This certificate proved that Pudge Heffelfinger was actually the first pro football player, on record that is, because he was paid $500 to play, well actually it was $500 and some cakes is what the ledger says, to play one game for the Allegheny Athletic Association on November 12, 1892. But what does this have to do with fantasy football? Well, let's flash forward 140 years. To 2023, where football has become so popular that an armchair game with people just hanging out on their phones are played by fans in rural conversations of family gatherings, work functions, maybe even enemies of the state, of the nation, of their own selves. It doesn't matter because fantasy football, the great equalizer, something that back in 1892, when Pudge Heffelfinger was paid $500 and some cakes to play a game, he knew nothing about. Or even when John Brawley was there in 1895, September 3rd, or 15 days later, when Daniel David Palmer possibly performed the first chiropractic care over in Davenport, Iowa. But what does this have to do with this week's guest? Well, this week's guest is no different because Dr. Kevin Murray is a chiropractor by day, and he's a fantasy football commissioner extraordinaire by night. Well, and day and the weekend and everything else. Now, Kevin is deeply involved in all aspects of fantasy football, including his own site, Fantasy Football Unlimited, which is, well, let's just say the least, an incredible fantasy football directory and so much more. Now, one of Kevin's claims to fame is that he won the ESPN contest of Commissioner of the Year, and that gave him so many more opportunities after that. We'll get into that in the interview, though. But before we get in the interview, I gotta ask you, you know what? I'm going to tell you, make sure you mash that little subscribe or follow button on your podcast player of choice. That way you get the hottest, freshest off the press episodes, well, each and every week. And if you want to learn more about this podcast or our other guests, there is a website dedicated to this show. It is at fantasyfootballoriginstories.com. But now that you've completed your homework, let's get into this interview with Dr. Kevin Murray. Let's go there. I mean, looking at the back there, obviously you got Barry Sanders, Jerry Rice. I mean, two of the most prolific guys in the history of the NFL. But so take me back to your first memory of playing fantasy football.
Yeah, so I first started playing in about 1995. So growing up, as a kid, I was obsessed with sports from the earliest age. I just, everything was sports. I mean, I didn't play with toys unless I was simulating like a sports game, right? I didn't watch cartoons. I was watching Sports Center. So the first season that I really remember really being in tune with was 1985 with the Bears. And it was such a exciting team, right? There's so much personality. And so to dive into football for the first time kind of with that squad, it really kind of had a huge impact on me. And then, obviously the legacy of Walter Payton was a big deal, just learning about football. And then that obviously gave me some appreciation for the running back position. And so as soon as, we had like a sporting news subscription and Sports Illustrated, and as soon as I got word of what Barry Sanders was doing at Oklahoma State, 300 yards a game and just having such an incredible Heisman season, I fell in love with Barry. And then obviously, as soon as he hit the scene and for the Lions, I spent 10 years of my life, Thanksgiving, one of my favorite days of the year, just because you got to see Barry play, right? So, but fast forward to about 1995. Again, had the Sporting News newspaper, actually rewind a couple years. So I remember watching like a Sports Center segment where they talked about fantasy football. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I growing up, loving sports, obsessed with baseball cards. And obviously with that, stats were such a huge deal. So at an early age, I became obsessed with statistics. And then I see this report on Sports Center about, fantasy football. And I love football. I love stats. Playing sports myself, I always kept stats. When I'd play video games, before the video games even did that, I would keep stats actually playing the video games. And so I opened up the Sporting News. It said, basically, it was 1995. It said, fantasy football challenge, right? And I remember thinking, okay, when I heard about fantasy football, this is a cool thing. I got to do this. And so it was this newspaper deal. You basically would send in your lineups. I got my mom's credit card and she fortunately helped me out, getting to play. And I was pretty young, but I got signed up. I had my girlfriend at the time, who's not my wife, but this was early high school. Her parents had a fax machine. And so I could get the results sent to me via fax, so I was always there bright and early Wednesday morning, or what I think it was Wednesdays, when I get the results from the weekly contest. When I'd hear that fax machine, it was just the coolest thing, right? Because I knew those numbers were coming through. And so it was a sporting news challenge. It was like a rotisserie style thing where it was a league of 25 people, and it was just cumulative stats. And so then you had a league, and then you had a conference, and then, grand prizes and all that. But out of 25, I took first place. And so I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. So I was obsessed with fantasy at that stage. That's where it all started, 1995.
Man, talk about a totally different world, having to send in your roster and then having to wait for the fax machine. And then nowadays we just sitting on the toilet checking your rosters on your phone and everything.
Well, yeah, I know. And the coolest thing is, at the same time, I had a part-time job at Napa Auto Parts, right? Stocking shelves, just go there after school and work for a few hours. And I picked up on some of the full-time people, like the people that would pick the shelves, pick the parts and whatnot. I picked up that they were in a fantasy football league. And so I had just gotten off of playing this great game, but I really obviously wanted to play in a league. And so I would purposely leave little notes of statistics, jotting down players around their stations so that they would, wonder who it was that was, such a football fan and fantasy minded, just to elicit an invite. And sure enough, it worked. And so I got invited into that league, played in it for a few years. And this was again, still, on paper, live draft, and, call in the commissioner for results and tally up the scores in the newspapers. And even then, it was so much fun. I knew it was going to be a big part of my life.
So that's cool. You can, you have a story into how you even wiggled your way into your first true, like, in-person league and everything like that.
Oh, yeah.
So you said the first one in 95, that was like rotisserie. So are we talking like almost like salary cap style, or how did it work?
Exactly. Yeah, it was as far as I remember, so long ago. No, it was salary cap. Like, you had a cap and you had to select your players each week.
So was the cap adjusted as as the players progressed throughout the year, or was it stagnant the whole time?
No, I think as far as I recall, I believe that the numbers were, or the costs were changed every week. And so you had to kind of reset a lineup.
Yeah, I mean,
as far as I remember,
it would make sense, but at the same time, without the instant digital type of age, dealing with the newspaper and everything like that, I was curious how quick they could turn that around,
Yeah, no, and that's, it's kind of foggy, but I think that on the result sheet that I would get, which again, I don't know what everyone else was doing for their stats. I think that you would, I don't know if they would send it off. They would maybe mail it to you. It was crazy, but yeah. Then you just call in, I think, some hotline and list your players, and someone was doing it. Someone was tallying it up for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, as it progressed through the years, I remember one guy telling me before about how it's a league that still is going now. It's like a buddy from work, but they had been playing since, I don't know, I think it was even the 80s. It could have been a little earlier, and I'm not sure exactly when it was, but back when you had, wait for the newspaper to come out, look at the box scores, it's basically just touchdowns, and then he would have to call everybody and give them like the updates. And this is landline, with the rotary telephone and everything, probably.
Yeah. Oh, funny.
But I mean, as it's progressed, I guess you've been playing for so long, when the online version was available, like what was that like for you? Did you jump in right away, or is it something that you just kind of dip your toes into?
No, that was again another good story. Is I had just started chiropractic school in 2001, and that was the first time where I was aware that there was online, right, with Yahoo. And so getting together in this new class with students, I thought it was right ahead of, it was in the summertime, essentially. I thought, gosh, what would be a better way to get to meet these people and get to know them better is to start a fantasy football league. And so I invited, everybody in the class to find out who was interested. And we started a fantasy football league 2001 on Yahoo. And that was the first time I played online. And so this is so cool because all of our years in school, the same group would play fantasy baseball, basketball, football year round. I mean, we would spend more time in the computer lab, setting rosters and waiver wires than we would studying. So it was a huge part of that schooling, is just us and our friends. And that's kind of the league that I'm kind of known for, with the commissioner stuff was that league established in 2001 on Yahoo. And then the group kind of changed a little bit once I moved back home. We kind of, we changed. I really wanted at like, it was, 2009 or so, where I really wanted to switch over to just all in-person live. So we made a big conversion of the league, and the rest is history.
So first off, I was curious why you called yourself the doctor, but now I guess I know as a chiropractic physician and everything like that. I mean, that is something that you still practice or no?
Yeah. That's my day job, but I've been a commissioner longer than I've been a chiropractor. So when you watching the games or like the injuries and things like that, do you actually have a keen eye like that can help you with your analysis as far as, okay, yeah, they'll be back, but you know what, they're probably going to be decoy or that type of thing? Yeah, certainly. I mean, obviously with my understanding of physiology and anatomy, it definitely helps. And I think for anybody that's interested in fantasy and playing fantasy, dialing into those content creators and resources that do, deal with injuries a lot. I think it does give you a competitive advantage when you have an awareness of or when you're listening to the experts in the injury analysis department. So for me, yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I think it really, really helps.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, one of the probably the most recognizable one is Stephania Bell, as far as like the injury. And, when her segment pops on, especially when it's in season, it's like, oh, okay, I got to stop doing what I'm doing. Maybe don't have it on double speed, take it back to regular speed so I can see what's going on here kind of thing. So, yeah, I understand that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Stephania, she's the best. She's wonderful.
So, I mean, I even seen that. It looks like in some of your photos here, like there was this fantasy football ranking somewhere or something. Like were you on set somewhere with him? Like there's other photos. You're on set other places. How'd you get into these places like this?
I mean, it's a long story. So here we are. So around, like I said, around 2009, somewhere around there, a friend of mine and myself, we kind of started to brainstorm. So I look back on previous fantasy experiences. Again, we did our home leagues, from that school league, so much fun. But I had played in some other leagues. I had encountered, the best that fantasy had to offer, but then I also saw some weird, strange things that occurred. So one time I was in this kind of a high stakes league. It was kind of like my big league that I was most, passionate about. It was a fun league, great league. But one year the commissioner kind of ran off with the money. So I think he had maybe spent it and didn't have it to replenish. And so he went dark. I mean, I think it all ended up getting worked out, but that happened in a league of mine. And I was like, that's strange. And then I remember playing in a league that just completely blew up because someone was mad about some trash talk, and they just dropped their whole team. Didn't like that experience too much. It kind of threw off the league. And then I remember another league where there was a stat correction, and a manager just got so irate at the commissioner because he thought that the commissioner was messing with the numbers, right? So I had those experiences where I thought, I need to take this in my own hands and try to create the best league that I can. And that's what inspired us to do more live local. I gathered, friends from junior high, elementary school, high school, college, family members, and we basically put together this league in 2009. And then 2011, I believe, is when we first went live. And so with that, I just went crazy on the draft. I thought, let's just make this the best league in the whole world. And so I had this, big speeches and lots of decorations at the draft, and just kind of blew people's minds when it came to what they expected the league was going to be like, and then what happened. And then each year after that, I ramped it up, with decorations and trophies and speeches and just making the draft experience more elaborate. And so, So I did that for multiple years. We started making, videos on YouTube and just trying to make the league as fun as possible. And then ESPN and Pizza Hut put together this contest to name the Commissioner of the Year, right? So that's what, you recall with the NFFC experience, right? Meeting me right there. So I was, again, just passionate commissioner. And this contest came up and I thought, wow, this would be so much fun, because the grand prize was, it just blows your mind. Basically, they gave me like a $10,000 Commissioner of the Year ring. The red jacket was like a custom made like Commissioner of the Year jacket. They flew me and a friend out to New York City, and then they picked us up, in a town car, drove us out to ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut, to spend the full day out there with all the ESPN fantasy people during their ranking summit. So basically, they had the contest, Commissioner of the Year. So it was called Commissioner of the Week. They basically named a Commissioner of the Week each week of the season. And then they would take those 16 winners and basically had a judging panel that selected the grand prize winner. So they did a show, online. Field Yates hosted this show, and they announced the winner, and sure enough, I won. And so for me, growing up, obsessed with ESPN, my whole life, when I was a kid, I just wanted to be Dan Patrick or Chris Berman. And ESPN was everything to me. So, and then again, falling into the commissioner deal and just being so passionate with the commissioner experience, it was so surreal to go to ESPN and collect all these awards and meet these great people. And so it really inspired me to like want to do more, right, in fantasy. I was obviously busy with career and all that. I wasn't aware of so many people that existed within the community, the fantasy community. I didn't know there was all these, extra sites and, websites and content creators outside of like, the Yahoo people or the ESPN people. So that's where I ended up going to like the National Fantasy Football Convention. I met you there. That was such a cool event. And I went with a couple of my buddies, league mates. And we had such a great time, because with that Commissioner of the Year award and winning that, I connected with so many people in the industry, all across the spectrum, and met so many great people and got so much support with that. So when I went down there to that National Fantasy Football Convention, I got to meet all these people in person that I had interacted with just a ton, the fantasy footballers, or, Brad Evans, Brandon Funston, Liz Loza, Stephania Bell, got to, some Matthew Berry. Obviously I spent time at ESPN with Stephania and Matthew and Field Yates. And then I got to see them again down in Texas. And it was just such a great experience. And so again, meeting all those people inspired me to, again, just try to want to do more in fantasy. And so that led to the follow-up year after the NFFC. We went to SportsCon. So again, met a lot of new people in fantasy. And I believe at that time I had started Fantasy Football Unlimited. And so the passion behind that was basically to help promote, all these great content creators and people within the industry that normal players of fantasy don't know exists, right? So, even though, if you're diehard fantasy, obviously all the big names, but the fantasy footballers. But there's a lot of people that play fantasy that just have no idea that all these great creators exist. And so I thought, I love supporting these people. I love, sharing their content. And so I wanted to create a kind of a portal into the industry where I could showcase, all the different resources in fantasy and help people just kind of fall deeper in love with the game. So through that, I joined the Fantasy Sports Gaming Association. Got to meet a ton of people. So I've been to, multiple conferences, just met a lot of great people. I've been down to Arizona. I've met, went to the footballers studio and got to spend some time with them. And I've seen all these people in multiple cities and had a lot of fun, great nights with these guys. And so it's just so much fun. It's a dream come true to kind of be a part of the community and within the industry.
Hey, it's kind of cool how the journey kind of like sparked from, hey, I kind of want to put recognition out there to some people that they wouldn't necessarily know. And like you said, your website going on fantasyfootballunlimited.com for the listener here. I mean, you go to the different buttons. I'm just looking at, okay, here's fantasy resources. I'm clicking on that. And then as soon as I click on it, boom, now there's a whole bunch of different resources that come up. I go to podcasts and you get like a bunch of different podcasts, and you like, it's like I don't know, like a directory for fantasy, all things fantasy football. It's pretty neat how you decided to put that together there.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, again, that's what it's all about. I love the industry, and with meeting so many great people, I love the people so much. The Fantasy Football Expo is we've done that last couple years. That's that event that they do out in Canton, Ohio, led by Bob Lung. He puts together this expo where just all the creators and diehard fantasy football community people go to Canton, go to the Hall of Fame, and spend a weekend just having an absolute blast. And so, again, feel very fortunate to be able to have attended all these events and met all these great people. And so it just kind of brings more and more out of what I want to do with Fantasy Football Unlimited.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about was the Fantasy Football Expo. So that's a yearly thing in Canton. It's not like it's a rotating by cities.
No. So yeah, the expo is at the home of the Hall of Fame, right? That's where Bob Lung lives. He just invites the entire fantasy community to come and celebrate the game. And it's grown each year. It's the absolute best to attend. You meet so many great people, and it's so much fun.
So that National Fantasy Football Convention that I met you in Dallas, is that something that is still going, or did they shut that down?
Yeah, so it went that one. Well, first that originated. That was going to be the person who put that on was Tony Romo's cousin, right? So there was the controversy back in the day where Tony Romo wanted to attend to host a fantasy football convention, and the NFL shut him down. And so eventually they were able to get that to work. They put together such a fun event. I mean, that event we went to, all the players and all the fantasy industry experts and analysts. That was just a great event. I don't know how it performed, when it comes to the finances and all that. I know they shifted from there to turn it into SportsCon, which was going to be basically broadening it out to more sports. So I did go to that the next year, had a great time, and then it stopped. And I don't know, I believe the next summer might have been the
COVID year, because it was COVID,
2018. So it might have been COVID that stopped it. And then from there it hasn't gone on. But there is an event. I've seen information on an event that's supposed to happen in Las Vegas in June of 2023 or something like that. That's called Fantasy Con or something like that.
I saw that too. Yeah, when I was looking online,
I don't know if it's related or not. The person that I saw directing that doesn't seem to be the same as the other one, but maybe that's something. But I don't know. That's a busy time of year. I know the expo is what a lot of people are really focused on.
Yeah, that was the one that looked like it was more consistent. And if you're, say, a general fan or whatever, that might be the place to go. Plus, then I saw on the website, if you get the premium package, it also gives you a Hall of Fame pass for like a day or something. There's it's like really, really, what do you want to say? There's a lot of value to that one ticket that it has.
Seriously, it is the best event. I mean, basically Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there's things going on. There's pre-expo parties and they have like a flag football competition, and they have draft night out. There's just so many different elements to that. And then on Sunday they actually have the expo where they're having panels and people talking, and they have obviously content creators galore. There's so many, but then there's also fans that are coming into that event now more and more, which is awesome. And so if you are just a fan of fantasy football content and love the creators within the space, going out to Canton, experiencing the Hall of Fame, attending the event, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'd like to go to that one this year. And to tell you how serious I was back then, that 2018, like about a week before then, I had my kidney taken out, but I still went to that event, and I went to the Fantasy Footballers live event because I had the tickets. I'm like, man, I really want to go and meet these guys and stuff. So
wow,
I wasn't supposed to be walking around at a big major event like that, but against Dr.
Oh, that's incredible.
So talking to a doctor, I probably shouldn't do that.
I love that. That's amazing.
But so that conference, I mean, I'm doing a little bit of thing here. It's a bit that I do on my other show called the Football History Dude. Let's see if you can see this in the thing. I don't know if you catch that DeLorean right there.
Yeah, for sure.
Typically, I mean, you even mentioned 1985 at one point, so that was when this movie came out. At any rate, you already did the whole spiel. I was going to have you go back in time and bring me to what Fantasy Football Unlimited is. So how about now let's go into the future instead. The podcast that it looked like you had started, is this something that you will in 2023 launch?
Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. The tricky thing in my world is just finding time. So I've been really trying to be creative with figuring out, ways I can really do all the things that I want to do within the fantasy space. Lots, in the works with that. But yeah, so I'm really excited about the podcast. Really want to, I feel like the word unlimited, even though Russell Wilson kind of messed it up. With the whole Mr. Unlimited thing. I feel that's a great word to describe, how I see fantasy and in all the, all the excitement that fantasy brings to people's lives. To me, celebrating the fantasy football experience is what I'm all about. I love the league experience. I love every aspect of that. I love the content. I love the entertainment. And so with the podcast, I really am looking at doing, tons of industry interviews, but I'd love to obviously branch outside of the industry, and anybody that loves playing the fantasy football, I'd love to get them on and to hear their stories. And so, but there's also a lot of things I want to get into on the commissioner side. There's a lot of advice and recommendations that I have on that front. But I think the commissioner, the league experience is just a great thing to talk about amongst people that are passionate about it. So much content that I'm excited to come out with the podcast. And that's just going to get more and more active as we progress.
So then that makes sense why one of the episodes, Commish Unlimited and everything like that then.
Yes, for sure.
I think that the 360 view will be, kind of cool for the listener. That's not just, it sounds like you're not just another rankings show. You're going to talk about like the experience of fantasy football that we all know and love and think about all day long, all year long kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't mind sharing, my advice and analysis and recommendations for players, but that's not my passion within the industry. I respect all the people that do just dive so deep into the content, into the analysis, and I really want to showcase those people and help spread the word about all the different resources within the industry. So that's kind of the primary focus on everything Fantasy Football Unlimited is to share and highlight the resources within fantasy that are out there that people don't know of. Again, when I think of, the average fantasy football player, they're listening to advice from the league site host, the analysts from that site. They're not really aware that there's other people out there. And so I'm aware of those people now, and I've become acutely aware of how many great people are out there just totally dedicated to fantasy. So if I can share their resources and content and spark, more interest from people that didn't know they exist, but dive right in and it impacts how much they love the game, then that's what it's all about. If I can get one person to find a creator that they love and are passionate about and are excited to engage with, then that's what does it for me.
Yeah, I mean, so what I was gonna ask, and I have to other interview guests so far, is like, what's your fantasy football superpower or something like that, or your claim to fame? But basically, you just gave it to me. I mean, like that is you're if you're in one of those board games, you're like the support unit that maybe you're not the front line, you're not this, but you're the medic or something that's like bringing everybody and making sure everything moves forward. So let's take that analogy then and give me, because you've been in the industry for so long, from a very, I guess you could say, observant point of view, what's some of the biggest changes you've seen over the last 20 years or so, or even, geez, you've been 30 years. Give me the past 30 years change of fantasy football.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously night and day when it comes to, writing down your lineups and getting your stats from the newspaper. But if we just we get past that point, just think of the internet. Obviously, there's just been so much change, especially over the last, 5 to 8 years in regards to the amount of people creating content. It totally coincides with social media and with, the development of these social platforms and the ability for people to just create content and put it out there. That wasn't an option back in the day. So once it became a thing, we've seen an explosion of content creators. I think that looking back to like COVID, there was a lot of people that really dove into the industry. And that's kind of where I really started putting together these creators on the site and links to all these different people. And I have honestly seen a lot of people stop right over, once they get back to real life. And there's a lot of people that have come and gone within the space, which is unfortunate, but I think that's kind of natural, for something like this. But yeah, the biggest thing to me is just the explosion of content creators and seeing all the things that people are doing on all the different, social media sites. It's really cool to me. I mean, again, it really allows you to have a lot of options in regards to who you listen to, who you listen to, and who you follow, and who you connect with, and who you vibe with. So I think it's great. Just tons of content, so much more content than we could ever imagine. In fantasy. Looking back, I never would have, expected this much information.
Yeah, and because it's cool too with the individual creators, like you said, even 15 years ago, they didn't have that ability to just pop open your phone. And I guess maybe 15 years because the iPhone or whatever, it wasn't that long. It was not that long ago where they couldn't do it. And that leads us to the next DeLorean question. So now you get to flash forward 20 years into the future and you get to predict kind of open-ended question, but like where you see either fantasy football or some other change that's different than what it is now.
Yeah, and I have been really fortunate to be a member of the Fantasy Sports Gaming Association, FSGA. So I do get a lot of industry, information in regards to where things might be going and all that. And obviously, sports betting is a huge thing in America that's going to be just keep growing and growing, getting into all different states and mobile wagering and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's going to be just a lot more of that. But I feel like fantasy will continue to grow with that, just because fantasy is it's a different experience, right? The fantasy league experience you can't replicate with gambling, right? It's such a fun journey that you can share with others during the course of the season. Obviously, DFS is a twist of fantasy. But it's still that's lacking when it comes to the fantasy experience that I love. So I think it's just going to continue to grow. I think more and more people are going to just play the game. Whether it's at their offices or family leagues and whatnot. But there will be definitely more of an infusion of like the player props and gambling on broadcasts and all that kind of stuff. I mean, just the fact that like this year with Matthew Berry getting involved with NBC and being on Football Night in America, such an amazing thing for fantasy, but definitely it shows kind of where things are going to go in the future. And even on his broadcasts, he'll touch on some betting and player props, that kind of stuff, information within those telecasts. And I think that will kind of go to all different networks and continue to move forward with fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, I could see a lot. That's kind of been one of the common answers too that I've gotten, this along the lines of like just the sports betting world keeps going. Plus, then also there's going to be like you said, just more and more access. I'm just curious what's going to ultimately be like that. I don't know. Next innovative thing that no one saw coming, like when we first got the internet to play fantasy football, or whoa, I can actually do a draft on my phone now while I'm walking around in the park. Like I'm curious, like what's going to be the next innovative thing,
Oh, I am too. I would love to know.
Well, for other reasons, because monetarily speaking, that might be an advantage to us both. But so
for sure,
let's give last words of wisdom to the listener of the show. But let's talk about through the lens of somebody who thinks fantasy football truly is unlimited.
Again, just appreciate the game, right? The game, the league experience. That's what fantasy is all about. That's what brought most people to this game, right? It's that maximizing the league experience and doing things to help engagement in your league is going to make everyone in the league experience the game at a higher level. And to me, the best way to have a successful league is to just be active in engagement, do things for, whether it's power rankings or weekly commentary on matchups or something. Commissioners really should step up to help bring everybody together, because when everyone's jiving in a league and everyone's on the same page and engagement's at a high level, the fantasy experience is at its best. And so the more and more leagues find success and have fun with what they're doing, the more the game of fantasy will spread. And to me, I think the world's a better place when people are playing fantasy and enjoying the game. So the more people playing, the better.
Well, there you go. A fantasy football chiropractic superstar, commissioner of the year, and just a straight up hardcore fantasy football fan. And I hope you enjoyed this interview and all of the episodes actually that we've had over here on this show so far. I mean, this was episode 5. We've been kicking it for over a month now. And if you did enjoy this episode, well, I kindly ask you maybe to consider leaving an honest rating and review. And of course, you got to tell your friends while you're at it. But speaking of telling your friends, next week's guest was sort of brought up in this episode. We're going to talk to Bob Long, the founder of the Fantasy Football Expo over in Canton, Ohio. But for now, dudes, I'm through if you're through. Thank you for listening to this episode of Fantasy Football Origin Stories. To make sure you're the first to get the next episode, please make sure to mash that little subscribe or follow button on your podcast player of choice, then head over to the website for the show notes and more Fantasy Football Origin Stories. That's at fantasyfootballoriginstories.com. And remember, dudes, where we're going, we don't need roads.
Great Scott!
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.